The Dark Beasts by Frank Belknap Long. Peter bent and examined the frog. It was dead. It lay amongst the pebbles at the edge of the stream, and its long legs were rigidly out-thrust. "Who would want to hurt a poor little thing like that?" muttered Peter. "The poor little thing." Peter was not very bright. He was 18, but he had the mind of a child. Yet he knew that the frog had been cruelly and maliciously strangled by person or persons unknown. Shivering, he laid a cautious finger on the tight, gleaming wire which encircled the amphibian's neck. The cold flesh sent shivers up his wrist, almost as far as his elbow. "Who would want to hurt a poor little thing like that?" he reiterated in perplexity and amazement. He did not linger over the small, pathetic corpse. It was growing dark, and he was afraid of the rapidly lengthening shadows and the black, spidery branches that met in the air high above his head. The wood was an unfriendly place when the sun ceased to shine upon it, unfriendly and very dismal and full of voices. When Peter arrived home, his mother was setting the table for supper, and his stepfather was sitting by the window with a week-old newspaper across his knee and a corncob pipe between his decayed and discolored teeth. Peter shut the door and advanced awkwardly into the room. "Hello," said his stepfather. "Where have you been?" "Just fishing some over by the creek," replied Peter nervously. "I was hoping a trout might come along and swallow the worm, and then I'd have 'em. I was just over there fishing. That's all I was doing ever since I went over there. I've been there and nowhere else. I was just hoping a trout would come up so I could get 'em." Peter's stepfather frowned. He was a tall, gaunt man, well past middle age, with dark, ill-humored eyes and a grim mouth. "Look here, boy," he rasped. "Didn't I tell you not to go snooping around in them woods? Ain't you got no sense at all?" "I didn't mean no harm, Pa," whimpered Peter. "I was just fishing in the creek. I was hoping a trout would come up so I could get 'em. I wasn't over there for nothing else." "Yeah? Well, don't let me catch you going into them woods again. If I catch you so much as putting a foot in them woods, I'll give you a hiding you'll remember as long as there's breath of life in you." Now, Henry," said Peter's mother from beside the stove. Peter was silent and contrite all during supper. But as soon as the last morsel of food was disposed of, he excused himself awkwardly and retired to his room. He was horribly frightened. In his sensitive, untutored mind, the savage moodiness of his stepfather was obscurely linked with the way he felt deep down inside when the sun ceased to shine upon the wood and the still, dark waters of the creek. He wanted to run when his stepfather threatened to give him a hiding, not because he dreaded the sting of the lash, but because he was afraid of something that lay concealed behind the cruel, inhuman mask of his stepfather's face. "You shouldn't have spoken so harshly to him," said Peter's mother as she gathered up the supper dishes and carried them warily to the sink. "He's a good boy, and he didn't mean harm." "Oh, didn't he?" said Henry. "Didn't he, though? What about his going into the woods against my orders? What about his snooping around where them things are waiting and watching? Maybe he's talked with them. For all I know, he may be on their side. He ain't bright, and you gotta watch out for that kind, Mary. You gotta watch 'em mighty close. You can't tell what they'll be doing and saying." Peter's mother sighed. "He's got to have some fun." "Yeah, well, he'd better stay out of them woods. I can take care of the beasts they set against us, but the law wouldn't let me harm a hair of his stupid head. If they set him against us, there ain't nothing I could do. He's your son, not mine. If they set him against us, I'd just have to clear out. How you like that, woman?" Peter's mother moistened her lips with her tongue. "Have you been doing anything cruel again, Henry?" Peter's stepfather arose from the table and sent his chair spinning against the wall. "It ain't none of your business, woman," he cried. "I gotta protect myself, ain't I? If the crops all dry up and the cows won't give no milk, I got to fight back." He cleared his throat. "It's them croaking frogs they set against us causing all the trouble. You can't tell me it wasn't them croaking frogs. Night after night we've been hearing 'em croaking. Well, I stopped it. You won't hear no croaking tonight." Mary's face went ashen. She set down the platter she was holding and faced him. "The frogs were our friends," she moaned. "I've been hoping and praying that you'd never do anything so cruel. You said you'd do it, but I was hoping." "What good does hoping and praying do when we've got worse than the devil against us? When God made the devil, Mary, he made him good, but them things were made bad in the first place. They didn't have to fall. I reckon they was no part of creation at all. They got in somehow by mistake." "The frogs were our friends," reiterated Mary despairingly. "Yesterday, when I was walking in the woods, they warned me. One of the things was in the tree, waiting. If I hadn't got the warning, it would have dropped on me. I could see its wicked, cruel eyes glaring down at me through the leaves. But when the frogs started croaking, I turned and ran. They're getting bolder and bolder, Henry. They know that Jim's father ain't come back, I guess. They're getting ready to get us, I guess. I'll have to go to them when they really want me, I guess. I'll have to take Jim's father's place. I'm not of the same blood, but I married into the family, and the curse is on me." "How about me, woman?" muttered Henry. "Don't think I ain't been thinking about what's going to happen to me if we don't fight 'em. When I married you, I took you for better or worse. Well, it's been far worse, but I'll stick to Jim if you'll stick to me. You got no right criticizing me. I've been mighty good to you. When you told me about your dead husband and the curse on his family, I said it didn't matter, because I reckoned you'd make me a good wife. But when I said that, I hadn't seen them things. I didn't know what they was like. I didn't know they'd set every beast in the woods against us." "They didn't set the frogs against us, Henry. The frogs liked us. The frogs were warning us." "Don't you believe it. Them croaking frogs was against us. They was against us from the very start." He laughed mirthlessly. "I did just what I said I'd do. I said I'd put the heads of every one of them croaking frogs into a noose, and I did. I've been over there all day. There ain't a croaking frog left in them woods." Mary sank into a chair by the window and plucked nervously with her fingers at the loose, wrinkled flesh of her face. "It was a cruel, evil thing to do," she murmured. "No good can come of it. The frogs were our friends. They were the only friends we had." "They was set against us. They put a blight on the crops and kept the hens from laying and the cows from giving milk. I'm glad I put their croaking heads into a noose. It'll be a warning to them things that I ain't standing for no nonsense." "You are going to be sorry, Henry. The frogs were our friends. They were only trying to warn us. Those things are getting restless and impatient. They'll be wanting me and Peter before long. They'll be wanting you too. They'll come for all of us before long. So long as we had the frogs to warn us, there was hope. But now there ain't no hope for none of us. We got no friends even in the woods. The things got claws, Henry. They'll tear us. There ain't nothing we can do. I felt kind of safe with the frogs there to warn us. Maybe they weren't much help, but I felt as though they were watching out for us. The things know now that Jim's father ain't coming back to his grave. He ain't going to keep the bargain he made with them. But with the frogs there was always hope. They seemed to keep the curse from working. They sort of made me feel safe." It was past midnight when Peter awoke. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and stared bewilderedly about him. Something was tapping on the window pane. Peter didn't want to get out of bed. It was a chilly night, and he felt warm and comfortable beneath the heavy blankets. But something was tapping on the heavy window, insistently, monotonously. Tap, 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 tap. Slowly, reluctantly, Peter threw back the covers and slipped to the floor. "I'm coming," he muttered. "I'll open the window for you. I'll do what you want. I'll open it wide." Tremulously, he advanced across the floor. His heart was beating wildly, and fright and horror looked out of his eyes. Yet when he reached the window, his gaze encountered merely a dark, amorphous blotch beyond the moon-silvered pane. To his dazed and sleep-befuddled consciousness, it seemed to be moving slowly and awkwardly about, like a great helpless June bug. Only it was much larger than a June bug. Peter raised the window till the wind blew full upon his frightened, vacuous-looking countenance, and ruffled his unruly reddish hair. Ordinarily, he would have feared the consequence of so rash an act, but a curious and powerful compulsion was upon him, and he acted instinctively and without thought. For several seconds he stared into the wavering, earth-scented darkness. Then, shaking his head, he turned about and shambled back into the room. "Ain't nothing there," he muttered. "I thought there was something, but I must have been wrong about that." Frowning, he climbed into bed. "I was afeard it might have been something out of the woods," he murmured as he pulled the covers up over his chest. "Something alive, like them things I seen when I was 8 years old." For a moment he lay staring up at the ceiling. His childish, untutored mind was teeming with images, memories, impressions of a dim and shadow-haunted past. "It is not good to ask what's in where they put grandfather," he uttered. "It is not good to ask where grandfather went when it came in. I was not there when it came in, but I heard mother say it was awful, and grandfather was a very wicked man for all his goodness. He made a bargain with it that came in. Once, many years ago, when I was 8 years old, I saw grandfather talking with what looked like one of them, only the room was dark, and I could not see very plain. It was standing in the corner by the chimney, and grandfather was talking to it. It was not as tall as grandfather, and it was bent, like as if it had a hump on its back. Its head I could not see very well, but as good as I could make out, it was like a snake's head when you look at it from its back. A bear with a snake's head, that's what it looked like, and it was enough for me. I couldn't have stayed in that room much more, as the smell made me sick, but I didn't stay as much as I could have stayed if I had wanted. The head of what stood by the chimney was enough. When I told mother what I saw, she nearly fainted. She said, 'It is what I feared. Your father, too, has talked to them. Oh, why did I marry in such a family?' Then she kissed me and said, 'Poor boy, oh, you poor boy, you will see them too. They will come for you.'" "What was it, mother?" I asked. "Tell me, please, what it was." "When you are older," she said, "you would not understand if I told you now." I never saw one of them again, but before grandfather died, he told me about them. "They only want to rest," he said, "but they can only do that when somebody dies. They are from far away, and they only want to rest in new graves. The trouble is, I guess, grandfather never came back. He never kept his bargain. They want to rest, but they can't rest forever and ever, and they was waiting for grandfather to come back. But grandfather is out in the world somewhere right this minute. He's walking the earth now, and he ain't coming back if he can help it. And all the while they was laying in his place in his grave on the hill, waiting. I guess they got tired of waiting there in that deep, dark grave for grandfather to come back. Mother said I would see them sometime. She said they would come for me. Maybe that's why I get feeling so funny inside of me when I go into the woods. Maybe that's why Pa doesn't want me to go into the woods. Maybe it's because when someone makes a bargain with them which he doesn't keep, they comes back and take someone who's related when they get tired of resting and waiting. That's the only way I can figure it. Mother knew that grandfather wasn't going ever to come back again. When somebody's got a chance to live forever and ever, he ain't going to come back if he can help it. Who'd want to give up seeing the green grass and feeling the cool wind on his face and smelling the earth after it's been raining, just because he's made a bargain he don't have to keep? I don't blame grandfather for not wanting to come back. If I got a chance to live forever, I wouldn't come back. I'd go walking on forever, just happy in the thought that I could see the green grass and smell the wet earth, and have someone loving me all the time. Drowsiness was creeping slowly over Peter's brain. For several minutes he continued to mumble, but his thoughts gradually ceased to dwell on the dim and shadow-haunted past. His eyes closed, and his lips parted in a peaceful smile. His conscious mind, purged of all imagery, was becoming once more an immobile instrument, vacuous and content. It drowsed in peace, cut off from the waking world, and utterly unaware that an alien presence had entered the room. The object that appeared in the open window was squat and wet. It stood for a moment, swaying unsteadily on the silvery sill. Then, with a croak, it leaped swiftly downward. For an instant thereafter, the window remained empty. Then another shape emerged from the blackness and flopped to the floor with a raucous croak. It was followed by another and another. Peter did not wake as the strange procession hopped and hobbled over the floor. He did not even stir in his sleep. A few minutes later, the window was again occupied. The new intruder was much larger than the croaking shapes, larger and darker. It was covered with thick black hair, and its small, ill-proportioned head moved agilely about in the moonlight. For a moment, it lingered on the sill. Then slowly, deliberately, and without uttering a sound, it lowered itself to the floor and ran rapidly across the room. As it ran, it opened its mouth, and a low hiss came from between its white and gleaming teeth. The false dawn crept like a wounded thing through the aisles of the forest, spilling a redness over the gaunt trees and casting flickering shadows on the deep, dark waters of the creek. In Eaton's pond, a lily pad turned into a gigantic scarlet hand, and a spotted salamander broke water with a soggy plop, strewing air bubbles in all directions and leaving in its wake a swirling trail of caddis houses miraculously aglow. The lily pad hand burned upon the water, and burning bright in all the illumined aisles of the forest were the keen, inquiring eyes of the forest, the moistly sniffing nostrils of the forest, and the scampering small feet of the forest. The woodchuck is not a too curious animal, nor are the red squirrel, the flat gray field mouse, and the sly and furtive ferret. Even the hoot owl, with its wide, distended vision, will not tarry to watch a haystack go up in flames. But Oglethorpe's neighbors collected at a safe distance to watch his cottage burn. The flames crackled and soared, and cast a weaving radiance on Oglethorpe's gray-walled barn, and the manure pile which towered between the barn and the well by the ice-house, with its rusty pump and waterlogged bucket brimming with red Novembral leaves. When the local fire company arrived, the intermittent flickering had given way to a blinding glare, and the entire landscape was illumined. In helpless despair, the firemen joined the bystanders and watched the flames subside to a dull red glow. Before morning, the darkness covered everything like a heavy blanket. At dawn, the neighbors swarmed in. They poked about amongst the ruins and made a hideous and appalling discovery. The charred remains of 3 human bodies lay scattered gruesomely about amidst the blackened brick and still smoldering embers. All that was mortal of Peter and his mother lay dispersed and unattached, but Peter's stepfather had suffered no disseverment. He lay upon his back with his long legs outthrust. The flesh of his body had been charred to a crisp, and his features were blackened and distorted almost beyond recognition. One of the bystanders bent and laid a tremulous finger on the tight and gleaming wire which encircled the dead man's neck. The still warm flesh sent shivers up his wrist almost as far as his elbow. "He's been strangled," he muttered. "Before ever the flames got to him, he was a dead man." "It's the queerest thing I ever laid eyes on," said Sheriff Simpson as he emerged from the tool shed. "Did you find something?" asked Chief Deputy Wilson. He was standing in the long, dew-drenched grass at the rear of the shed, gazing westward in contemplative detachment at the blackened ruins of the ill-fated farmhouse. "Frogs, Jim," said the sheriff. "Frogs?" "Yeah, about 20 of 'em, all strangled with a brass wire, just like Oglethorpe was strangled. Only the wire Oglethorpe was strangled with was made of copper, and it was about 10 times as heavy." "But what about the frogs?" "They're all laying in the shed there, all dead, strangled. But the funny part of it is, they were laying beside a big spool of copper wire, the same kind that Oglethorpe was strangled with." The chief deputy shook his head. "It looks to me like there's more to this than appears on the surface." The sheriff nodded. One of the neighbors was watching the house burn, and he said that just before the fire company got there, he saw something run right out of the front door. He said it was smaller than a man, but that it had a human look. It was dark, he said, and as good as he could make out, it had a human look. He couldn't see it very plain because of the glare, but it seemed to be all covered with heavy black hair, and the mere sight of it, he said, made him want to vomit. Queer, ain't it? He said the thing was carrying a lighted torch.